Hey everyone, it's Jacky here. I'm a certified financial planner based out of Vancouver. And as you can see, we're finally done moving. So I'm back finally with a new video. And for this week, I want to talk about the top 10 retirement mistakes that people make during planning. These are often mistakes or obstacles that we see our clients come across. So hopefully this can help you avoid some of them. All right, so let's jump into it. And the first mistake people often make is they mistaken if they even want to retire or what does retirement mean for them. Now, most of the time when clients bring up the idea of retiring, this is the first thing we go through is we will start asking them, describe retirement to us, why do you want to retire and what does it mean to you? And what ends up happening is every 10 clients we have this conversation with, 3 to 4 of them end up realizing they don't want to retire, they simply hate the job. So what they need is a sabbatical or maybe a new job, but not an official retirement. This is important because if you rush into retiring, there are some things you cannot reverse, such as CPP and OAS. Once you start, you can't really stop. So if you start them too early, you might take penalty when you don't have to. You might miss out on bonuses because you might be able to push them all the way until 70. And on top, if you're working again, this might push you to a very high tax rate and it just makes the whole planning ineffective and it will actually hurt you long term. So before you actually look at the numbers, make sure you're mentally ready and you really understand what retirement means to you. Now, the second mistake I see people make is not simplifying their financial pictures quickly as they enter into retirement. Now, sometimes we see clients retire with 5 rental properties, 4 corporations they opened before, but they're either not cash flowing that great or the corporation is just there holding a bunch of cash, a property here, a property there. It's not really doing that much, but it is costing them a lot of money to maintain every year. Now, yes, a planner like myself will be able to help them keep track and lay out things for them to understand, but it still requires them quite a bit of effort to gather those info and to keep track going forward. Plus, when you're that complicated, you probably need a property manager or 2. You need a CPA for personal, maybe a CPA for corporation. You probably need multiple lawyers for the personal side, corporation side, the estate side. And it just becomes very convoluted, very expensive. So instead, maybe we should have a plan that over the next 5 years or so, start selling some stuff, maybe consolidate them together. So by the time you're retired, your picture is a lot simpler. You don't need 1,000 people to help you maintain this portfolio. And you can spend your time traveling, eating good food and spending time with your friends and loved ones instead of trying to keep track of everything. And I would recommend doing these before you hit age 70 because by then, all your CPP, OAS, RRSP income are going to start whether you want it or not. And you will be put in a fairly high tax bracket for most of my retirement clients with good amount of assets. If you wait until then to sell things, it's gonna make you pay a lot more tax. Plus, you're probably gonna face OAS clawback and just makes the whole retirement, those years very tax inefficient. So definitely have a plan and start simplifying things if you're entering into retirement. Now, the third mistake I see people make all the time is they don't understand or plan with their government benefits. So there are 2 types of clients when it comes to these kind of mistakes. The first ones are the ones that are overly optimistic of what the government benefits can do for you during retirement. For 2025, regarding any bonuses or penalties, your max OAS and CPP at 65 would be $2,100-ish. Now, from what we can see, most of the time, even retiring with 2 people together, this kind of income at best probably supports 1/3 or maybe 1/2 of your monthly spending. And if you have a mortgage on the side, you definitely won't have nearly enough. You do have to save quite a bit in your TFSA and RRSP. I highly encourage you to do some at least simple math or simple planning to figure out how much do you need to save and kind of work backwards for a lump sum for you to aim for. Most of the case, we see people at least needing anywhere from $700K to maybe $1 million spread between the RRSP and TFSA for a very comfortable retirement with a lot of leeway for like inflation or sudden spending and all that stuff. But the key is you want to start as early as possible. Do those planning so you have at least an idea how much you have to save. And if you can't commit to that kind of saving now, at least you know there's a goal for you to work towards. You don't want to wait until you're 65 or 70 and then, sometimes clients come to me and say, well, what am I gonna do? I don't have enough. Very difficult to get around. So make sure you start as early as possible. Now, the second group of people is they don't understand how powerful your penalties and your bonus can be for your CPP and OAS. So for CPP, the standard is 65. Now, the earliest you can start is 60. every month you take earlier, you are going to get hit with a minus 0.6% per month. So if you take 1 year before 65, that's going to be 7.2%. And if you take it at 60, that's going to be a negative 36% penalty. On the other hand, if you take 1 month after 65, your CPP bonus will be 0.7% per month. So if you take 1 year later, it's going to be 8.4%. You take it at 70, it's going to be 42%. And for OAS, there's no option to take earlier than 65, but there is a bonus. However, the bonus is not 0.7%, it's 0.6%. So you will get a 36% on your OAS if you start at 70. And this is a huge difference because if you were to take the max OAS CPP at 65, it would have been $2,100-ish. You push it back to 70, just looking at the bonus, you would have been sitting at $2,600 per month. This can really help your retirement later down the road. Now, usually the best time to take it would be 69 or 70, assuming a normal life expectancy in Canada. That will give you the maximum benefit over the lifetime. But sometimes what people do when they come to us for planning is they will tell us they started them already right on 65 or even earlier because they took an earlier retirement and they thought they see a little bit of cash deficit and they thought, surely I need to start my benefit now to tie me over, when there are other ways to get around this. Now we can see how big the deficit is first. If it's not that big, it just requires a tiny bit to tie us over and let us push back our benefits several years for those guaranteed bonuses. Sometimes, in most extreme cases, it is advisable to maybe use a HELOC, pay some interest on it, but the benefit is going to outweigh the cost. Now we're going to do some math, do some comparison to really map out potential reward versus benefit, reward versus cost. But my point is that a lot of people just jump into it right away. They don't really consider. Once you start, it's too late. You can't turn back and you would lose those bonuses forever. All right, next mistake is poor RRSP management. So here again, we have two groups of people. The first one is they dip into their RRSP way too much too early and they drain their RRSP account too quick. Now I get it, once you retire, you have all these free time, it's exciting, it's a new life stage. Often people go out and there's a million things they want to try, they want to buy, they want to experience, and they start dipping into RRSP aggressively. This doesn't look that much, maybe 10,000 here, 5,000 there, but over time it does add up and it actually becomes very detrimental to your long-term retirement. Because first of all, there is a 30% withholding tax for any amount over 15K from your RRSP. So if you're drawing, for example, 50K, you're not just drawing 50K, you have to account for the 30% withholding tax, that's 72K. Now, yes, you can get some of it back depending on your tax rate by April, but you still have to draw that extra money up front first, so that will leave you even less money to grow tax deferred within your portfolio. Also, if you draw a bigger amount in the beginning of a retirement, it actually means quite a bit later down the road. So using the last person as an example, let's say he has 500K growing steadily at 4% a year for the next 30 years, he could withdraw about $28,000 a year until it runs out at year 30. But if he were to take that 70K lump sum, he would actually only start with 430,000. Given the same numbers, he now can only draw 24K a year for the next 30 years before money runs out. That's a difference of $4,000 per year times 30 years, that's 120K. So he didn't just draw 70,000 out of his RRSP early, he actually lost about 120K over his lifetime. Now on the other spectrum, sometimes we have clients that have way too much in their RRSP and it starts to affect their other benefits. This seems like a really good problem to have, yes, but at the end of the day, you pay all this tax to the government, you should look to get maximum benefit if possible. And one of the biggest obstacle is a RRSP that becomes too big, because once you hit 71, it becomes a RIF and you're forced to take a certain percentage per year. Now sometimes we have clients coming to us with $2 or $3 million in the RRSP, they ignored it, and now they're 70, next year they're gonna start drawing from the RIF. Even at the lowest, 3 to 4% mandatory withdrawal rate, that equates to about 100 to 120, 150K in income. Instantly, they will lose almost all your OAS benefit, if not everything. So instead of waiting that late and have nothing else we can do about this, maybe 10 years before you start withdrawal, you need to look at a meltdown strategy. Draw RRSP on purpose, try to find a more tax efficient way, and then push them towards your TFSA if you have the room, or your non-reg. So you're not left with such a massive RRSP account that we can't do anything about. All right, so next mistake is not understanding how your pension from work actually operates. And here it's specifically talking about defined benefit pension. Defined contribution also, you need to do a little bit of research and understand it, but DB is really, a lot of people have no idea at all, and usually they would make the wrong choice for their retirement. Now, there are a few important aspects of a DB plan you should understand as early as possible. Now, the first thing you should understand is how your benefit is actually calculated. Is it the last 5 years average, best 5 years average, a flat rate? All these is going to affect your sabbatical, when you should take that sabbatical, and whether you should accept the next promotion. Now, the second aspect is how does early retirement penalty works. A lot of people just assume it's 3 to 5% a year for every year before the unreduced year, which can be true, but in other pension, it will put you on a complete different formula and can cut your pension in half. So I've seen it before. So you do want to understand that early, because sometimes you might aim to retire at 58, but your formula dictates that if you wait 1 more year, it might give you a third more or double the pension amount that you're receiving now. And the third aspect is other benefit other than the guaranteed income that comes with the pension. You don't always have to take the lump sum, it's attractive, but in some cases, staying with the pension plan also gives you other benefits, for example, medical insurances or some other senior benefits that also translates to a certain dollar amount. So you're gonna be very careful and find out what do you actually get by staying with the plan. And the fourth aspect is when can you take the lump sum and if there's a time restriction. So some jobs like RCMP, you can only take the lump sum pension if you take it before 55 or 25 years of service. But if you pass that point, you don't get to go back and take the lump sum. You're forced to take a guaranteed income for life, which for most people it's fine, but if you have another spouse with guaranteed income as well, maybe you don't need 2 guaranteed income, I don't know. But you do want to find out early if there's a certain time limit. And last aspect is how does indexing work within your DB pension? A lot of people just assume, of course, my income, it's going to be guaranteed for life and indexed to inflation every year. That's true for some cases, but for other cases, I believe like Hoop pension, I think I just looked at 1-2 months ago with a client. They specifically say that indexing is subject to board approval every year now, and it is very important depending, because we can see what inflation can do to your buying power. So you do want to understand if and when are you getting this indexing, and that might affect whether you want to take the lump sum and do it yourself or stay with the plan. Now, staying with this train of thought, the next mistake people make when retiring is they ignore what inflation can do to their spending power. Now, inflation is one of the most detrimental obstacles to most people's retirement. That's why there's a whole article from 1995 titled "Inflation is Theft." Because at 2% inflation a year, you will lose a third of your purchasing power in 20 years. But if inflation is at 3%, the same dollar that you spend today, you will lose about 50% of its purchasing power. So when you project for your retirement, when you plan for your retirement, you have to put inflation as part of your planning. If you don't, you just assume you can always spend $5,000 a month and retire like that, you will be very surprised in about 10 or 20 years. Our next mistake is not downsizing when it's time to. So sometimes when we plan with a client, they tell us they're very sentimental about the property they've been living in there for 20-25 years, and they really don't want to downsize. But I think at times we have to accept that the property has outlived its purpose. Maybe when you bought it, your 4 kids are young, you need to have a lot of room for them to run around, right? But now those 4 kids, they have moved out, they have their own family. 2 of you really don't need a house that's 6 bedroom. And again, it goes back to the same point we were talking about. If you are willing to be open-minded about downsizing early, maybe those equity can help tie you over and don't require you to take your OAS CPP so early. You can push them all the way until 70 for that massive bonus and can really help you in your retirement. So when you retire, I would say keep your mind open about downsizing. Try to weight this equally as all the other options. That will give you the max flexibility and ensure that your future cash flow will be fine. Now, tying to this would be the next mistake, which is people are over-reliant on their things like reverse mortgage or HELOC. Like I was saying, people are sentimental, sometimes they don't want to sell, but they do need to tap into the equity. So they rely on these programs, especially a HELOC. In the beginning, it's not that much, the cost is very low, but they do add up over time. and eventually it can be very detrimental if you're not careful with it. So I'm not saying don't use these programs. Now, when we plan with clients, if they have to use these programs, we usually track them very closely to ensure they don't go out of hand and it ends up damaging their retirement. And the second last mistake that people make is they ignore the possibility of critical illness. So a lot of people assume if I get critical illness, I can just get treated for free. But what ends up happening is most people don't want to wait. They can't wait that long, and they want to opt for paid treatment either in the US or in other countries, and these can end up very expensive. So when we plan with clients, we often bring up critical illness and we want people to address this even if they don't think there's a high chance of happening. And there are really three things you can do. Number one is save extra today. Just save using your own money. Start a different account on the side and invest for long run. Number two is buy critical insurance. This might make sense, cost versus benefit. And number three is maybe if you're not from Canada and you're allowed to, go buy a medical or hospital insurance with your home country, then which provides a private program. So if anything happening to you, worst case, you can fly back to your home country, claim the insurance, and start treatment right away. All right, the last mistake that people make is they don't plan for the no-go stage. So when you retire, we often say there are three stages that people go through. First is the go-go, where you're traveling a lot. The slow go, where you're doing same thing but less, and the last one is no go. A lot of people do not put much thought into this stage and they don't anticipate. You need to talk about this. What are you going to do when you hit that stage? Are you going to hire a nurse? Maybe you sell your home and you go into a nursing home. Maybe your kids, it's going to move you into the basement and take care of you. Depending on your culture, depending on your family expectation and relationship, you might have very different solutions to this problem. The worst thing you can do is assume it's going to be one thing. For example, your kids will take care of you, and then when you hit that stage, you realize they can't even take care of themselves, or they've never thought about taking care of you. They just always assume you're going to go into a nursing home or you have money for nurse, right? You don't want to find out when you get there. Talk to your kids, what are your expectations and what is my expectation, and see if you can start working on a solution right now. All right, guys, so that's the top 10 mistakes that I see clients make all the time when we start doing retirement planning. So hopefully this list have helped you, and I don't know, maybe you have made some of these mistakes as well. If you see other mistakes people make all the time, or you made them but it's not on this list, let me know in the comment down below. If you like these kind of videos, I'm back now. I try to do them once every 2 weeks, so we'll see if I can upload another one in 2 weeks. But if you like this, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!